Hey, is this thing on? Hello? Hit it again. I think it's on now. Welcome to Hiker Trash Radio, where each week, Doc will drag some colorful characters out of the woods to talk trail and Type 2 fun. If you're aspiring hiker trash, or if you're just looking to understand the hiker trash in your life, look no further. So lace up those boots, gnaw on some jerky, and settle into your 20-mile pace as we fire up the podcast from somewhere deep in the backcountry. It's time to embrace the suck.
Welcome back to another week on the trail, dirtbags, hiker trash, and of course, good-smelling day hikers. I'm Doc, and this is Hiker Trash Radio. Hey, if you like what we're doing here, take just a minute and help us out. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you don't like what we're doing, just go ahead and keep that to yourself. All right, let's get to this week's guest, thru hiker and author Suzanne Roberts. Welcome to Hiker Trash Radio. How's it going, Suzanne?
It's good. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm very excited to talk to you because one of our favorite topics on Hiker Trash Radio is, of course, the John Muir Trail.
Yeah, I am happy to talk to you about the John Muir Trail. I've hiked it a number of times.
Okay. Now, in all your time out on the trail, not only the John Muir Trail, but the other trails that you've been on, have you picked up a trail name?
It's really interesting because maybe somebody else has named me, but not that I know of. But I have trail names for everybody I come across, and they just don't know it. So, yes. And then I see them over and they become whoever I've decided they are. And sometimes I tell them and sometimes I don't. So I'm more of a namer than a namee, I think.
Got it. And what is the determining factor of actually sharing with somebody what you have named them?
I think if I get to know them and learn their real name, and then especially if the thing I named them was like cute or funny, and they might be complimented by it, or maybe they need a trail name.
Okay. I'm going to make a note to ask you at the end of the episode if you have given me a secret trail name during the podcast here.
Okay. And I will decide whether I want to share it with you or not.
That's right. Totally. That is your decision.
Yeah.
So we typically go by trail names here on the podcast. I go by Doc. That's not on my paycheck or driver's license. But for the sake of our talk tonight, I guess I'll just call you Suzanne, unless we stumble across a trail name during the episode.
You could. I'm about to head out to the Black Rock Desert for Burning Man, and I have a Burning Man name.
Oh, do tell. What is your Burning Man name?
It's Sassy.
Sassy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In the limited experience I've had with you so far, I think that seems appropriate.
Yeah, and I'm not even wearing my like glittery bra or my fishnets. So.
All right. My sister, my younger sister, she's 6 years younger. She has been a staple at Burning Man for a couple of decades, I believe.
What's her Burning Man name?
I have no idea. I think her motto is what happens at Burning Man stays at Burning Man.
Oh, see, that's like opposite to my motto. I've written a lot of essays about Burning Man.
Okay.
So, yeah, I like to write about Burning Man.
How long have you been going?
My first burn was 2007, and I missed a couple years when I was taking care of my mom. She was dying. And then there was, of course, COVID, so there was no Burning Man then. So I think I've probably been like 10 or 11 times, something like that.
Okay. And Burning Man, for our initiates out there who have no idea what we're talking about, do you want to fill them in on what that's all about?
Sure. In the northern Nevada desert, there's a huge playa, which is basically a dry lake bed. And every year, culminating on Labor Day weekend for a week, there's a temporary city built where there's a post office and there's mutant vehicles and there's art structures, giant, big 10-story art structures. And it's a city that's built. And then at the end of the week, it disappears without a trace. However they want, and it's a gift economy, so you can't buy anything out there. There's a lot of music and art, and it's out in this really harsh desert landscape. So it's a really beautiful juxtaposition of art and nature.
Okay. Now, my sister and her husband, they have been involved with some of the art installations. They have helped an artist who is up in one of the outskirts towns of Yosemite, and they work on some art installations and then take them out to Burning Man. So you've probably seen some of their work.
I'm sure I have.
All right. Hey, have you had a chance to listen to the podcast?
I haven't.
Okay, I love that. I love someone who's going in blind, doesn't know quite what they're getting into. So it'll be all fresh and new for you. But I want to make sure that you are aware that we have a segment towards the end of every episode called Hiking Hacks, where you will be called upon to share some trail wisdom with our listeners to make their next outdoor experience even better. So don't be surprised when we get there.
I love to give advice, so that'll be my favorite part.
Perfect. Your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Now, I just want to alert you and the listeners and watchers on YouTube that if you see me flailing about here in the studio, it's because I have trapped myself in the studio with a big, slow-moving fly. So, yeah, I don't want you to be alarmed that I think I'm seeing something or I don't know, but just a heads up.
I'll let you know if it lands on your hair.
Perfect.
And stays there for minutes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
And if you have any advice on getting rid of flies while conducting a podcast, I'm open to that too.
I think you need an electric fly swatter.
An electric one? What does an electric one do?
It zaps them.
Okay. Because
yeah, it's not very nice. But.
All right.
Trailblazers Toolkit.
That's right, Sassy. It's time for Trailblazers Toolkit, sponsored by the ultralight backpacking gear company 6 Moon Designs. I love to talk about gear with my guests, and I love to hear about the most important item in my guest's adventure gear. If you were preparing for your next adventure, and I was the one providing you with all your gear, what is the specific piece of gear you would insist on being packed? Make sure to give me all the specifics on that piece of gear and tell me why you've got to have it out there. And this can be any type of item. It could be gear, it could be apparel, it could be a luxury item. So, Sassy, what is that item in your toolkit?
It's probably not the item that most people pick, but I would really like you to pack me a really lightweight journal and a pen and extra ink so that I can write in my journal.
Okay, so you are old school.
Because I'm so old school.
A lot of people these days are taking notes and journaling on their digital devices out there.
I do bring a phone to take photographs, but I don't check it or check the internet or anything like that. I use map and compass still. Yeah, so I'm really old school. Yeah. So I don't take notes on my phone. I write.
Okay. And speaking of old school, just looking at your background, what's behind you? Is that a virtual background or is that real?
No, that's real.
That's real.
Yeah, they're floor to ceiling bookshelves.
Floor to ceiling bookshelves. Every shelf is packed with volumes of what types of books?
Oh, they're arranged by genre. So I've got fiction here, and I've got memoir and nonfiction, travel writing, because I'm a travel writer, so I have a ton of travel writing, poetry, and then I've got all my nature and wilderness books over there. And my books at the bottom are like teaching and craft books. Yeah, it's all arranged.
I am sensing a degree of organization in your personality.
It's interesting because I am pretty disorganized by nature. So if I go backpacking or on a trip and have a suitcase, within 5 seconds of getting where I'm going, it explodes and looks like Mount Vesuvius. So I'm just naturally disorganized. So I have to force myself to be more organized. And so the books is an outward appearance of me trying to be more tidy and more organized. But I'm also going to add, I want you also to pack a Helinox chair, the little lightweight chair that I have one. And it's like one of my favorite items. And I argue with people who say, oh, you don't need a chair. You can sit on your bear canisters. That is not comfortable. And if it rains, you can put it underneath your vestibule and you can put your backpack on top and your backpack stays dry. And then you can sit and write in your journal and have a really nice time.
Wow, a lot of trail wisdom right there. Suzanne, you and I are going to get along just fine because I have been roundly mocked for carrying a chair on the trail, just as you have described. But there is no substitute for being able to sit in a device that has a back to it on the trail.
Yeah, even if you stop for lunch for 20 minutes, you should have your chair out, of course.
Yes, your ultralighters out there they're listening in right now and they're shaking their heads, they're looking down their noses at us, but you know what? It's worth the pound. Yeah. No, it's all the ultralighters. I think it's jealousy that they don't have a comfortable chair. Okay, and I think you try to move me off the bookcase issue a little bit too soon because I have a follow-up question. And okay, if you go over to a friend's house and they have a bookcase and they have some books on there, and they're not arranged by genre. Do you find it hard to not reorganize for them?
Oh, I would never reorganize someone else's bookshelf. That is overstepping your bounds. No, I think that all kinds of organization, if it's just a hodgepodge, or sometimes people do it by color, which is interesting and beautiful, but I would never be able to find anything. And I like to be able to find things.
Got it. Got it.
It's the hiking pole.
Oh, hey, it's time for the hiking pole, and that's pole spelled with 2 L's, not like the thing you carry out in your hand out there, but this is a survey, a 7-question survey that's going to help me give you a score on the sanity scale from 1 to 100, with 1 being completely insane, 100 being completely sane. Spoiler alert, no one's ever gotten 100 so far, because I talked to some pretty strange people.
Okay.
All right. Now, if I were to ask your friends and family, where would they put Suzanne on the sanity scale? Where would they rank you?
I think it depends on which friends and family. I think my husband would put me pretty far in the insane category.
Like 20, 25, 30?
100 is like insane. Like
No,
insane.
Other way around. It's 1 is completely insane.
1 is completely insane.
Yeah.
I think he would probably put me at, and 100 is not. I think he'd probably put me at 20, 30, something like that.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
He probably knows you best.
Yeah, he does.
Okay. Yeah. So you put on a good show for others, but he knows your level of craziness.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. All right. So these are 7 questions that I have not shared with you. They're all related to hiking. And this is not rapid fire, because I need you to give me your answer, which side of the issue you fall on, and then some explanation, because that's going to help me calibrate my score.
Okay.
Okay. So you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Question number 1. Speaking of poles, when you're out there, trekking poles or no trekking poles?
It depends.
Oh, you're already not taking one of the binary answers. You're going off script and going with depends. This is indicative of the kind of interview we're going to have.
Yeah, it depends. So if there are river crossings and there are steep rocky ascents and descents and there's snow, then yes, absolutely trekking poles for sure. If there are none of those things and it's more level, then I would say no. For example, I just got home from hiking the Camino in Spain, and on the Camino Frances, we were hiking huge miles every day, and I wanted to take pressure off of my knees and hips. So I did bring the poles, even though it wasn't very technical. Some parts were, but then when we went to do the Portuguese, which we did 2 Caminos back to back, I didn't use the poles because it was all like cobblestones and sand on the beach, and it just didn't feel like I needed them at all. So it just totally depends on the terrain.
Okay. And as my regular listeners will attest, there are sometimes I go with follow-up questions that don't count towards the hiking pole. This is not one of the 7. It doesn't factor into your score, just mere curiosity as we talk about things. Camino, through hike or glamping?
It's glamping for sure. Yeah. It's interesting. I think you could do it so that it isn't even glamping, so that it's just a pub crawl, really. You can stay in hotels and apartments and stay in 4-star hotels. So that's not even camping, but it's a lot of walking either way. But if you stay in the albergues, which are like dorm rooms, then some of those places are like ickier than I'd rather sleep outside in a tent, because you're not sleeping with a bunch of other people and sharing bathrooms. And so it's really different from through hiking in the wilderness, which is what I primarily do.
Got it.
Yeah.
I like this whole concept of, you've heard of ultra marathons. This is like an ultra pub crawl.
Yes. It's an ultra pub crawl for sure. And some people, if you do it the way it was created to be done, by leaving your house and then walking all the way to Santiago de Compostela and walking back, which some people do, then you can make it thousands upon thousands of miles. Okay. We did not do that. We just went one way.
Got it. Now, what is your go-to order when you get to the pub?
When I get to the pub, probably right away, I would just have sparkling water because I've been walking all day. But I am definitely more of a wine person than a beer person. So then I would move to wine. Yeah.
Got it.
And in Spain, the wine is cheaper than the water.
All right. And white wine or red wine?
It depends, right? It depends on the region. If I'm in
Of
Rioja,
course, it depends.
yeah, I might have a red Rioja, right, in the Rioja region. And if I'm in Galicia, I'll have an Albarino, which is white. So yeah, I will drink whatever region I'm in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair point. Question number 2, what's on your feet? Boots or trail runners? Or is there a third option that you're gonna confront me with?
I wear the Moab, the Merrell Moab, which is like between the two. It's a hiking shoe. And I really like it because I think it holds up really well. My husband, when we just did the Camino, was in the Hoka, which is the go-to now. It fell apart after 250 miles. And it's probably a little bit more sturdy on dirt, but if you have a lot of like different surfaces, rocks and asphalt, a lot of people's Hokas were falling apart. They did ship him a new pair, so they have a great return policy. But if you're on a really long walk, it's a pain to have to do that. So I was in those shoes, and then they fell apart after about 500 miles. And I just bought a trail runner in Spain. So if I had to choose, I would choose the trail runner, but I like a hiking shoe, but I don't want anything high top.
So far, you're 2 for 2 with going off menu. So we got 5 more.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Question number 3. When it comes to your shelter system out there, when you're not on the Camino, but when you are out in the Sierras, let's say, do you prefer a tent, tarp, bivy, hammock, or hey, let's just cowboy camp?
Tent for sure. And the reason is because of the insects. Right now, well, I live in the Sierra. I live in Tahoe, and we had a really big winter, and now we have a really wet summer, which is great. And we have a lot of mosquitoes. So I like to be able to have shelter during bug hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was just up in Desolation Wilderness at the end of July, and I can confirm a lot of bugs up there. But shameless plug for one of my sponsors, Sawyer. Their permethrin spray, you spray your gear and your clothing ahead of time, and their Pickardine cream. While Chopper and Buddy were being eaten alive by squadrons of mosquitoes, I was just happily minding my own business.
That's good to hear, because I'm out hiking every day here, and there have been insects even on day hikes that have driven me crazy.
All right. Question number 4. When it comes to your sleep system, are you a sleeping bag kind of gal, or quilt, or something else?
Sleeping bag, for sure.
Yeah. Well, why is that?
I don't know. Probably because that's how I've always done it. And as we talked about, I'm a really old school hiker, and we just always had a sleeping bag. So I think I've just always stuck with that.
Okay. Have you ever tried a quilt, or think you'll ever try a quilt?
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Side sleeper?
I move around a lot. So maybe a quilt is something I should try.
Might want to give it a shot. They are very liberating.
Are they warm if it's really cold out?
They are, especially if you have a good sleeping pad.
Okay, maybe I'll give it a go.
Okay. And there's no points if you waffle on your answers here. So no points deducted. Sorry.
Oh. So if I said to you, yes, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, you might even gain a couple points. Who knows? All right. It's completely subjective. It's all up to me. Sorry. When it comes to food out on the trail, do you prefer a stove, cold soak, or stoveless?
Oh, definitely a stove. What kind of question is that? How are you going to do coffee? Do you have to have coffee in the morning? Yeah, as you can see by my answers, I'm shaping up probably to be quite a luxury hiker, but absolutely a stove. And we have a couple of different options. My husband really likes the jet boil, but I think that's too limiting. I use sort of the old school alcohol one, but yeah, definitely a stove.
Okay. Yeah, I think cold soak people, they are a little different. You have successfully navigated the biggest point deduction in the poll. So congratulations on that.
Oh, do cold soakers get deducted?
Big deduction.
Yeah. I would only do that if I was forced, if everything broke. Mm-hmm.
All right. Question number 6, is life better above or below the tree line?
So here's the interesting thing. I have changed my mind about that over the years. So when I was younger, I really liked being below the tree line. I felt like safer in the trees, and I felt protected. And of course, if you're in a lightning storm, you always want to be below the tree line. But now, as I've gotten older, I really love being up above the tree line and on passes and with all that expansiveness. And I think it might be because I live in the trees, like I live in a forest. So now when I hike, I want to go up above the forest and see things from there.
Got it. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And question number 7, what's more important? I have an inkling and how this will go, but you may surprise me. What's more important, pack weight or luxury items?
I would say balance. I would say a balance of those things, because if I had it my way, I would bring a whole bunch of books, but I don't want to carry them. So when I first started backpacking, which I wrote a book about the first time I did the John Muir Trail, my backpack weighed, I think when we took off, it weighed close to 60 pounds. It was ridiculous. And I ended up injuring my knee and having a really miserable time. So I know better. But now the equipment is so light and wonderful, like so much better, that I can bring more luxury items because the backpack is lighter and the sleeping bag and the sleeping pad. And now the water filtration system, just everything is so light and wonderful that you can sneak in a few things like your chair and your journal, and it doesn't matter.
Got it. All right, Suzanne, stand by. I'm going to do some math here. I got to make sure my shoes are off so I can use all 20 digits. So I was an English teacher. I know that you also teach English, teach writing.
I do. I teach writing.
Yeah, so you can feel my pain. I have to do some math here. It gets a little complicated. Put it through the Hiker Trash Radio algorithm. See, I got to carry the 3. I've got to multiply that by root 5. It gets complicated here. And then I need to divide that by pi. I'm going to make a slight adjustment for the size and fit of your Merrill Moab. And I come out with a score of 47.
47. Right in the middle. I like that.
What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's good.
Some people out there give you a 47. Your husband definitely give you a 25. But some people out there might say, yeah, that's a pretty good fit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds about right.
Okay. Hey, before we get too far down the trail, let's back up a little bit and let's talk about where you grew up, what kinds of sports and hobbies you were involved in as a kid, and how did you get involved in the thru hiking cult? Because let's face it, any group out there that convinces you to be out living in the dirt, sleeping in the dirt for weeks and months at a time has got to be a cult.
Okay. I grew up in Southern California.
Whereabouts?
In
Sherman Oaks. Okay. What high school did you go to?
I moved to Thousand Oaks for high school. So
Okay.
I went to Thousand Oaks High School.
Okay.
I grew up, neither of my parents ever went to college. My mom didn't even graduate from high school. And so we didn't have very much money. I grew up in a very small apartment building, and we didn't have money to go on vacations. You hear my friends now talk about their vacations, or the friends that I have that have kids go on these amazing vacations. And that just was not my experience. But my parents, even though they weren't outdoorsy per se, they both like nature and they both the quiet. And so when we did go places, we'd go to the beach, or we would go, my parents took me walk for hikes in Sequoia National Park. I was dying to learn how to ski when I was little. And even though they weren't skiers, they took me to Mammoth. And so all of my trips were nature trips growing up. And I really loved being outside. I loved being out in nature. And I didn't ever want to grow up in a city or the suburbs, which I lived in both. And I made a pact with myself that I would never, ever do either thing. And I would always live either near the ocean or in a forest. And I have pretty much spent my whole adult life in mountain towns. And so I lived in Vail for 10 years and taught skiing, and San Luis Obispo, where I went to school. I went to my undergrad and master's, and then moved to Tahoe 23 years ago and did my PhD up here and taught at the community college, and recently quit 4 years ago, quit my full-time teaching job to teach part-time. And so I have the life that I always imagined. I always wanted to ski and hike and write, and that's what I'm doing.
So it's Dr. Sassy.
Dr. Sassy, that's yeah.
Dr. Sassy. Let's keep it official here. And let's go to Southern California, because I grew up in Southern California as well.
Where?
I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. I was born in Iowa. I was only there for 6 months, so I don't remember much of it. And family moved out here to Southern California. We lived, when I was really little, we lived in Westchester, but then we moved to the valley, and I grew up in Canoga Park.
Oh, pretty close then.
Not too far away. Not too far away. When you went to the beach, what beach did you go to?
Zuma and Point Zuma.
Zuma. That's right. Zuma.
And Malibu sometimes. Yeah.
Pay Zuma or free Zuma?
The free Zuma.
Free, of course, free Zuma. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. No, you just park. All you do is park on the other side. I don't know if you can still do that and just walk in.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. Some things they have not taken away from us yet.
Yeah. That's true.
And I tell my kids, I have 3 adult children, and I said, hey, your childhood was pretty cool. It was good, but it was nothing like growing up in the 80s in the San Fernando Valley. That, in my opinion, is just the pinnacle of growing up is that situation. It was such a fun, unsupervised, I don't know, wild time. And I surprised myself that I made it through it.
I know. Can you imagine if our parents had tracking devices on us the way they do now? I would have hated having a phone and having my parents be able to call me all the time. And half the time I told them where I was going somewhere different. And yeah, like hours away from where I said I was.
That's right. Now, you said that you are a part-time educator now.
Yeah, I teach at a MFA program in creative writing at UNR Tahoe. So it's a low residency MFA program. So I teach creative nonfiction, memoir, travel writing. Just finished teaching a class in pedagogy, just teaching them how to teach. So it's really fun.
Nice. Now, does that afford you enough income to go on these adventures, or do you have some other side gigs that you do?
No, I also have other side gigs. I also do editing, manuscript editing and coaching. So I coach individual clients who want to write books. And so I piece it together.
Have any of your clients hit the big time?
Not yet, but I'm hoping they will.
But
some of my students have.
Oh, really? Do tell.
I mean, how do you define the big time as a writer? I'll tell you who it is and you'll never have heard of her. But I've had students who have been published by big presses.
What percentage, it's probably an impossible question to answer. What percentage of writers are actually able to make a living from their writing?
Just from writing?
Just from writing.
Percentage? Like less than 1%, I would think. I also do travel writing too. So I'll do service articles, which pay more. So yeah, no, I have a million jobs. Like I have a million W-2s when it comes to tax time. So I piece it together, but I do have to teach and coach, or I would not be able to, and I just wouldn't be able to afford my life.
Got it. I always thought that I had the great American novel in me, and I just haven't gotten around to writing it yet.
Most people have it in them, and it never comes out.
Maybe you could coach me up.
Yeah, you can check out my prices on my website.
I thought we were friends, Dr. Sassy.
We are, and my friend and family rate still is really expensive.
Nice. I've been kicking around a couple of ideas. One is this notion of a murder mystery with a fugitive on the run on the Appalachian Trail, and the person who's following him, who the murderer, the fugitive, is leaving trail entries in the huts. And this guy that's following him is always a few days behind, but the story kind of evolves in that kind of sequence.
Huh. When you first started talking,
I can see you're not very excited by that.
No, when you first started talking, I was thinking about a book that my friend wrote, which it's a scary book for backpackers to read, but I think it's a really important book because it talks about who is safe in the wilderness. It's called Trailed by Catherine Miles. It's about the murders on the Appalachian Trail that happened in the 90s, the 2 women who were murdered. And she goes in and she realizes that who they thought had done it hadn't in fact done it. And so I think the subtitle is One Woman's Search for Justice. And it's an incredible book. But it's about how the wilderness, or whatever we call the wilderness, is not a safe space for certain people, the way that we hope it would be a safe and welcoming space for everyone. We're not quite there. And I think it's a really important book, but I think it's also a scary book, but I could not put it down. Yeah. So you should read that in preparation for your own trail murder book.
Got it. The other concept I was thinking of is just a compendium of some of the stories from the amazing people I've talked to on the podcast, because there are a lot of colorful characters out there that I've talked to who have some pretty amazing stories, some related to the trail and some of them just being the stories behind how they eventually got to the trail.
Yeah. I hadn't gotten there, my history on how I got to the trail, which is a good segue, I think. I love to hike, and I started backpacking when I was in college. I joined the outdoor club. We had this, it was called the Escape Route at Cal Poly. And I started actually working for them and checking in and out, climbing shoes and whatever, and going on their trips. And right when I graduated from college, it was 1993, and we were in a recession, and everybody was moving home with their parents, and I didn't want to move back home. And so a friend of mine suggested we hike the John Muir Trail. And so that's what I did at post-college. And I was going to go with her. She was very experienced and I was very inexperienced. And I thought that I would probably die out on the trail. So I ended up inviting a third young woman who had a severe eating disorder. And we thought that she might be cured by, it was just very naive and dangerous, but we were 22. And so the three of us ended up picking up this other guy in Mammoth. He didn't last for long because we were difficult trail companions. And so that was my first real through hike, was the John Muir Trail. And it took, you've hiked the John Muir Trail, it took us 28 days. So you can see how that went. But we finished. And years later, I wrote a memoir about it called Almost Somewhere.
That's right. I was just going to make that point that you have just summarized your trail memoir, Almost Somewhere. And these two companions who were difficult companions also with you were Erica and Dion.
Yes. And I was also difficult too. So it wasn't just the three of us were all difficult.
And what made you so difficult? The three of you, not just you.
So Dion was lovely person, but had a severe eating disorder and no backpacking experience. She hadn't backpacked one single night before the trip. Erica was the opposite. She had tons of experience, had been backpacking since she was little. And our trail name for her, again, as I said, I name people, we named her the commander behind her back, because she was dictating how long we would hike and where we would camp and how much oatmeal we would eat and all of those things, which thank God, because without her, we would still probably be wandering around out there 30 years later. And I was dreamy and very slow. I walk faster now, 30 years later, than I did when I was 22. I was super boy crazy. So I'd stop and want to talk to all the, guys on the trail. And I was really in my head. I brought a bunch of books. I was reading John Muir's My First Summer in the Sierra. I had all this stuff. I had a pair of running shoes, extra, thinking I was going to go for a jog after our daily hike. I had a crazy amount of stuff in my backpack. So I was so slow and I cried a lot. So no, we were all difficult. Yeah.
Got it. And we're going to get into a little bit more of that story of your 1993 trip and maybe some of your more recent experiences in the Sierras to see the contrast. And I do want to talk about your book. So we're going to save that for the second segment.
Of course.
We're going to take a quick break. We're going to pay some bills. We're going to hear from the advertisers. We're not going to be able to pay all the bills from these advertisers. We'll pay some of the bills with these advertisers, and we'll be right back. So stay tuned for that. Here we go. And welcome back. We are talking to Dr. Sassy, aka Suzanne Roberts, author of Almost Somewhere, and thru hiker and glamper and pub crawl ultra endurance athlete. I want to thank you again for joining us tonight. I've already enjoyed immensely the first segment here, and so I can't wait to hear some of your stories from the trail. Let's talk about that 1993 trip. We touched on it. 28 days, three difficult women out there, and I guess difficult people. I don't want to specify women. You were women, but take foot out of mouth. Okay.
I think that it's important, actually, that we were three women. And one of the reasons why is because when I was in college, all of the nature writers I had read were men. I hadn't yet been introduced to Mary Oliver and Pam Houston and some of the Mary Austin and some of the nature writers I came to love. But I was reading Thoreau and Edward Abbey and John Muir, and I couldn't understand why I didn't see the natural world in the same way they did. And I was trying to, and it didn't seem to fit That sort of like man alone in the wilderness, like conquer rather than community, isolation. And I went out there, and in some ways I think I was seeking a uniquely feminine or uniquely female version of nature. And it took me until years and years later, even after that, to realize that was never going to be the view of nature, because that was really the colonizers' view in so many ways. These white European settlers came to the Sierra in the 1700s and murdered and erased, right, the native people. And so that sort of theory or attitude of conquering the wilderness never felt right to me. And I never knew why until I started digging deep into it. And I think that part of it was that I was a woman, and I knew that I could never leave my body behind. It was going to have a period. I was going to be afraid of like stranger danger. And so I do think it's important. I think we write from who we are. And so I'm glad you said that. I think it's important.
Are you familiar with Christine Reed?
Yes, I am.
Have you read her or talked to her?
Yeah, she wrote Dirt Work, right?
She wrote, the one I'm familiar with is Alone in Wonderland.
Oh, I'm thinking about a totally different person, but yes, I am familiar with her. And I know that she's putting together an anthology.
I was just going to mention that based on what you just said. She's putting together an anthology called Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Yeah, that's great.
Details the female experience out on the trail, which is wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think we need more of that. And I hope that I see her posts and stuff like that. And I hope she's really successful with that.
Yeah, we've had her on a couple times, and she is a lot of fun to talk to. And I really admire what she's doing out there.
Yeah.
Now, how is, for our listeners out there, typically most importantly for our guys out there who are listening, how is the female experience different on the trail? What are women out there thinking about, concerned about, experiencing that guys often, take for granted, don't even think about?
I've never hiked as a man, so I can't speak from that experience, but I've read a lot of male nature writers, so I have a sense. I think the biggest thing, honestly, we talked a little bit about Catherine Miles' book, Trailed, and that deep-seated fear of being attacked, not by a bear or mountain lion. I'm not at all afraid. I just had bears in my yard last night. Like, I'm not afraid of animals at all, but I am afraid of human animals. And that's getting less and less as I get older, and and probably not like the target age for a serial killer anymore. But in fact, I know I'm not, right? Because I read Kate's book, but
I didn't know there's a target age.
There is. And it's what you would guess it is. 16, 17 to 30 probably. And so I hike alone
I thought you were in that range.
I know. It's the mountain air that makes me look so young. I hike alone every day. I hiked alone just before this podcast, and I never even think about it anymore because it does feel more like home. But when I first started getting out into the wilderness, it was scary. And I have had some scary encounters with men. And in fact, even last 2 months ago on the Camino, or last month, I guess it was in the Portuguese Camino, I had a guy expose himself to me. So it's not like in my head or in our heads. It's a real thing that happens because of the structure of patriarchy, and because of some men out there don't want to see women out alone, independent, walking. They want to scare women, and it's unfortunate. And of course, you're so much safer in the wilderness than you are in a parking lot, but it's still in your mind, and you can't completely forget about being in your female body. And I think that's the biggest difference, because I think as far as like strength and speed and all of that, we can do all of the same things. We just have to carry that fear with us, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what does that say about our society? Is it a commentary on American society? But then you mentioned that it happened on the Camino. And so I think what I heard you say was the patriarchy, and any society, any country that maybe has that structure, that could be a byproduct of that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not just in the United States. Mm-hmm. And in fact, after hiking the Camino Frances, I had dinner with 5 women, and every single one of us had a kind of scary experience, to a very scary experience. And I don't want to scare women out there who want to hike the Camino alone or want to hike T alone, because I think we should, and I think we need to, but I think we have to be aware. and look around, be aware, take precautions, hide your tent if you're in a place where you feel it's getting close to a road or something.
Okay. Let's go back to 1993. You're on the JMT. What are the highlights? What do you take away? What do you remember or what stories do you share when people ask you about that time?
It's easy for me to remember because I have a whole book where I've written all of the memories, but probably the highlight of that trip for me was the 10th day of walking, and we had reached the top of Muir Pass. And while we were up there, we saw a woman, quite old woman, who was walking alone, and she was walking overland. She was doing a circuit up there in the snow because it was snow on both the east and west sides of that pass. And I talked to her, and she says, "Where are you going?" She's like, "Overland." I'm like, "Yeah, but where?" Like, she didn't have a destination. She was just out there wandering. And then she just disappeared into the landscape. And I thought, that's what I want to be able to do. I want to be able to disappear into the landscape like that too. And also for me, it takes a really long time for me to settle in. And 10 days always feels like for me, the day where I start to really get my rhythm. So I like trips that are long. Like a 4 or 5 day trip is a great little getaway, but I never feel like I get into the rhythm whereas I do if it's a 2 or 3 or 4 or longer week trip. Yeah.
That must have been a powerful example of what was possible for you. Seeing that woman out there.
Yeah. And we even liked it when people would confront us, the 3 of us women walking, and say, "How could you be out here alone?" And we're like, "We're not alone. We're with each other." And back then, you did not see very many women hiking alone. And in fact, the year that I first completed the John Muir Trail was the first year the official year that they completed the Pacific Crest Trail. And that year, 13% of those who hiked it were women. That number is so low. I think it's about 50% now, or 40 or 50%. So things have changed a lot. And it's really nice to see the changes. And I love hiking from my house. I've hiked Yosemite from my house along the PCT, and it's the Tahoe Yosemite Trail. And I love coming across the women who are hiking alone. I always talk to them. Yeah.
Now, how has the gear changed since 1993? What was your pack weight on the Tahoe Yosemite Trail as opposed to your original JMT trip?
Oh, I don't go over about 30, 35 now, which is still heavy if I'm full of food. But usually
I thought you were going to say you were full of books. You don't want to get on board with the Kindle. You're carrying some heavy volumes out there, maybe all of the Harry Potter books.
Oh, I've never read the Harry Potter books.
Oh, no. Okay.
No, but I do have a Kindle, and I do bring it. So yes, absolutely. Yeah. And no, my insane score would have gone up if I told you that I just hiked 700 miles with a computer on my back, which I did, my laptop, because it was through Spain. I had internet, I had to work, but the gear. So back then we didn't have bear canisters. So we'd have to throw rope over trees, which was counterbalance, which of course the bears all learned how to do that. We had to pump water with these those blue and white pumps that would always break, and they were super heavy. And all the pots and pans were heavy. The backpack everything was heavy. I had one of those old ridge rests, which was the lightest option for a sleeping pad, and everything was heavy. And I hiked in cotton. Okay, fleece, cotton socks, cotton men's boxers, I didn't know about I don't even know if there was technical gear. I don't even know was Patagonia even around in the 90s? I don't know. I have to look it up. But there was no such thing as technical gear. And so now when people are like, cotton kills, and I'm like, cotton didn't kill in 1970 and 80 and 90. It wasn't comfortable and it wasn't ideal, but yeah, we hiked in that.
All right, let's talk about your book, Almost Somewhere. What was the inspiration? Why put pen to paper and write about this trip?
As I said, that the day on Muir Pass, day 10, I wrote that as soon as I got home. I took a couple classes, and then I ended up doing a master's degree. I had a degree in biology. So my undergrad was in biology. My master's was in fiction writing. And I was writing these sort of loosely veiled stories about my life, but called them fiction. And one of the stories that I wrote as nonfiction. And it was about that day, about day 10 on the John Muir Trail. So that was the first chapter that I wrote. And I wrote it way back, right when I got off the trail. And I needed to become the writer that I had to be to write the book. So I ended up getting a PhD in environmental lit. And I read a lot of nature writers. I read a lot of women writers. I read more diverse canon. And then I realized this might be a book. And so I started writing it, and I was teaching full time, getting my PhD. I had also published a number of poetry books by that time. And so it just took a really long time to write. And so I didn't finish it until 2008. And then publication, it took a long time to find a press, and it didn't end up coming out until 2012. And I would give talks at REI, the sports store, when it first came out, and people would say, "Why did it take you so long to write this book?" And I'd say, "Are you a writer?" And they'd say, "Yeah." And I'd say, "Then you should know. Writing a book takes a really long time, and you need to teach yourself how to be the writer who can write that book."
And do you have a summary of kind of what you want people to take away when they finish reading your book?
I hope that will inspire them to go on their own adventures. I also hope that if they're young women, it will inspire them to be objects or feel like objects of their own desires, and not or subjects, sorry, not objects, subjects of their own desires, and not the object of somebody else's desire, and do really what they want to do. I think it's a book about empowerment. I think it's also a book about friendship and coming together. And it's a book about doing a hard thing, and a thing being worth it because it's a hard thing.
Yeah, a lot of layers to your book. And as a former English teacher myself and an avid reader of books, I like that level of complexity. I like, on its surface, it's a story about three friends and a trip through the Sierras, but there are so many other layers to it than that. I think in the afterword you wrote, Almost Somewhere is about a backpacking adventure in the early 1990s, but it's also a coming of age story about female friendships, identity, and an interrogation of my complicated feelings about the natural world. And that's just a start. There is so much more than that in your writing.
Yeah. So last summer, my husband and he'd never hiked the JMT. And so we decided to hike it. And instead of crying on every pass because I was like, my friends were way ahead, or it was raining, or my knees hurt, I cried out of gratitude that, like, here I was 51. I could still climb these passes better than I could when I was 22, in fact. And I came up with the idea that I wanted to re-release this book with a new afterword that talked about looking back. And I also made some very small changes to the book. I also included a land acknowledgement, acknowledging that the tribes, the thousands of tribes that were there, and that the John Muir Trail was the Numu Puyo. It was the people's road. It was a ancestral path that was used way before any of the white settlers came. And I think that's really important for us to realize and to think about and to acknowledge.
Yeah, and part of that afterward that you added in the 30th anniversary of the trip, it talks about some of the environmental factors facing our natural areas these days.
Oh, yeah. As I said, I live in Tahoe, and we're seeing a massive number of firs dying. And we've got blight and bark beetles because of the stress that they've been in for years of drought. We had an amazing winter last winter that's helping, and I'm hoping for another giant wet winter again. But yeah, we're seeing some really different weather patterns for sure.
The natural landscape across America, across the world, is it on a different path now? You've got the fires in Northern California that are happening all the time. You've got this shift in weather patterns, it appears, where we've got now these, what do they call them? Air tsunamis, so ocean currents through the
atmospheric rivers.
Atmospheric rivers. Thank you.
Yeah.
My writing friend, helping me with the words.
Yeah, and we had something like 14 atmospheric rivers this winter, which was great. I'm a skier, and it's great for the trees and all of that. But it came all at once. And two of the houses on my street's roofs collapsed. And I had written an article in the New York Times that basically talks about this, that in the summer, we sit and check the AQI and check the fire danger and check NC Web. And I can see from here, I can see the scar from the Caldor fire. We were evacuated for 8 days, not last summer, but the summer before. And so the winter was where we could take a breath. And now the winters are acting really differently than we're used to. Yeah, so it's changing. And the mega fires are the number one thing that's disrupting people's through hikes on the Pacific Crest Trail. They're coming off the trail because of smoke, because of fire. And this year, I know a lot of people skipped the best part, which is the Sierra, because of the snow, and the river crossings were crazy.
Yeah, the best part. You're absolutely correct. I haven't done the PCT, but I'm partial. But just in terms of other big changes, my word, we just had a tropical storm go through the Los Angeles area in August, which hasn't happened in 86 years or something?
Yeah. We had rain all night last night.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and then right in the middle of it, you had an earthquake too, right?
That's right. Yeah, a little bit of earth shaking. We're used to that though.
And then the locusts are coming.
Yeah. But 100 and something days in a row of temperatures in the 110s in Phoenix, I believe. You've got water off the coast of Florida that is in the high 90s, bleaching corals and doing who knows whatever else damage out there. It seems like the world is shifting right now.
Yeah, I am hopeful that those of us who love the natural world, not just to recreate in, but also just to know it's there, that idea of the wilderness imagination, of the idea that knowing, right, that there's bears and there's mountain lions and there's raccoons and so much life out there. I hope those of us who really love nature will vote, and will vote for candidates who are more environmentally friendly, who will in their own lives think about ways. Like I also am a travel writer, and I think now a lot about ways to travel that are less impactful. Like I'm not going to go here and there and everywhere, but I'll go and stay somewhere for a long time, or walk across northern Spain rather than take planes. And so I am thinking about all of those things and how all of us can try to turn this thing around. I don't have kids, but for those people who do have kids, it's like, it must be a little bit scary.
Yep. Said I try and encourage my kids by, letting them know there's a lot of smart people working on the problem, but we all have to do our part, I believe.
Yeah, but it is beyond, it's the machine, right? And the systems. And yeah, I'm hopeful, but I'm also I used to say that I used to write about the natural world with so much like hope and so much wonder. And now that hope and wonder is mingled with a little bit of nostalgia and environmental grief too. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Hey, let's get back to something a little more positive. Let's talk about the Lost Coast. I love whenever the Lost Coast comes up on somebody's hiking resume, because it is such an intriguing little hike to me. I would really like to do this someday. When did you get to do it?
I have done it a couple times. The last time was a couple of years ago, and it's an amazing hike, but man, is it rugged. You think, 6 or 7 miles is a long way on the Lost Coast Trail, because you're walking on either sand, little mini boulders, or like huge boulders. I fell on my face. I had hiking poles. You got to bring poles on that one. I fell on my face twice, and it's pretty rugged, but it's so beautiful. And you have to follow the tides, make sure you're not on the wrong place at the wrong time. But it's such a beautiful, magical place.
Now, for our listeners who may not be familiar with the Lost Coast, where is it? How long is it? And what is the story behind it?
So you're going to ask me all those things about a hike that I don't know super well, because I haven't written about it, but it's out of Shelter Cove area. I wish I could tell you between this and that, and I would look it up if I knew this was coming, but it's in Northern California, and normally people do it on a shuttle. It takes about 4 days. And they start normally in the one area, and then they shuttle, but the shuttle's 2 hours long, and you can hitchhike, but it's really hard. So my husband and I actually just hiked it both ways. So we went up and back, which I recommend, because then you don't have to deal with all the shuttles and stuff like that. And I don't know the history of it. Do you?
I believe they were trying to extend the PCH all the way up, and it was too rugged.
Oh, that makes sense.
And so they abandoned that section, and it became known as the Lost Coast.
Yeah. No, that makes sense because
That could be a complete urban legend that I'm propagating, but I'm going to go with that story. No one's going to fact check me in real time.
Yeah. There are, I should also say, there are two sections of it too. The section I'm talking about is from Shelter Cove North. There's also a section that goes south of there that nobody hikes. But it's beautiful. However, it's super overgrown with poison oak. In fact, there's a lot of poison oak on the trail. It's one of the reasons I love the Sierra is because we don't have poison oak. But the southern section, my husband and I did hike. We didn't backpack it, but we wanted to go check it out. And I was like walking so carefully in some of that trail because it's pretty overgrown, but it's really beautiful and not crowded at all. We didn't see anybody on the southern part. It's lesser known.
Now, you mentioned the tides. Why do you have to know the tides on the Lost Coast?
Because the beach disappears in high tide. And if you're there, then you would be underwater. So you have to make sure you leave at the right time so that you're walking during low tide on the parts that are on the beach. On the bluff, you're okay, but there are a lot of places you have to hike right on the beach.
Now, did you ever camp on the beach? Ever set up camp on the beach?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's every so often there's like a creek with water coming in, fresh water, and that's where everyone sort of camps. And we camped, we camped right on the water, right on the beach. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Now, what is the bathroom strategy when you're camping on the beach? I know they give you instructions on what to do when you're camping at the beach. You want to share that?
Yeah, you go potty in the water.
And this is what they tell you to do. It seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah. What's the ocean? It's where all the sewage goes, right? And if you go in, basically you go in the water, and then and you want to go when the tide is out, so then the tide will just come in and it will wash it all away. So if the tide's out, you go out to the edge of the water, you go to the bathroom, the tide comes in and it's gone.
Oh, so you're not going in the water. You're going at the edge of the water?
Yeah.
You're digging your cat hole?
Yes.
You're not going like waist deep in the water.
No, it's so rough. And there's what do they call them? Sneaker waves that can come up. It's such a rough area that you can get washed away really easily.
Yeah, you don't want to get hit in your crouch by a sneaker wave. That could be problematic.
That would ruin your day.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, you've also been to Europe, as we know. You've talked about the two Caminos that you've done, but you've also experienced something called Coast to Coast and the West Highland Way. Can you talk about those?
Yeah, the Coast to Coast Trail it took us about 10 days, and it goes from the one side of England to the other. And it's really beautiful. And it's like the Camino. You stay in pubs, you stay in little hotels, you stay in people's houses, you stay in inns. And it rains a lot, but it's super beautiful. And a lot of the walk is through people's farms because they have this sort of right of way that like you can have your land, but you always have to have a place for people to walk through. Because of course, Europe, especially England, doesn't have the sort of kind of wilderness that we think about. Although the Lake District and the moors are definitely a lot wilder places, but you're also walking alongside cows and sheep and things like that. And that is a really beautiful hike. And then we did also in Scotland, we did the West Highland Way, which is so beautiful and goes through the Highlands and Glencoe Valley and some of the most beautiful landscape you'll ever see. And that one took a couple of weeks as well.
Now, it's interesting to me that over in England, they have this big issue going on right now, and maybe have for years, about wild camping. What you and I know is through hiking and camping, pitching your tent where you may. They don't like that.
No, because they don't have anywhere to wild camp. And I will say, one of the things that's super disappointing in the Sierra too, and I just have to say, anyone who's listening to this, just please pack out your toilet paper. Don't bury it. Don't try to burn it and burn the forest down. But the thing that's super disappointing in some of these European hikes is because there isn't this sort of like easily accessible wild camping. People don't understand the leave no trace and the sort of wilderness ethic so there's so much toilet paper everywhere, even though people aren't camping because they're going to the bathroom and they're just leaving their toilet paper, and it's disgusting and terrible. But it also happens here. I see it all over the Sierra, and it's really sad, and I don't know what that's about. because it's so easy to pack out or use a different system, bidet or something. But I think part of it is that if people were camping, can you imagine the mess that would be left? And it's like you're in somebody's farm property. So yeah, there's not wild camping on the Camino Frances either. Like you can't just pitch a tent and camp. And so that's really different, but nor would you want to, because you'd be right near a road or a farm, or it's not, yeah, it's different.
Can you just knock on the door
Of somebody's house?
Yeah. Hey, pardon me. I've really got to go.
No, you don't do that. You wait.
Don't do that either.
No, you wait. You go to a cafe or a bar or a pub or whatever, or you dig a really deep hole and you dig out or you pack out your toilet paper.
That's right. Yeah. When I started, I certainly didn't start in the 90s. I wish I had, but I didn't start in the 90s. When I started probably 8-9 years ago, the custom was to bury your teepee. But now there's a big push to, pardon the pun, there's a big push to take your toilet paper with you. And that's what I've been doing the last few years is I have a special bag covered in duct tape, so I don't have to see the inside, and you put your toilet paper in there and you pack it out. Not a big deal.
It's no big deal. And even when we did the John Muir Trail in 1993, we knew not to bury our toilet paper. Living in the Sierra for 20 years with a dog, the dog brought me lots and lots of disgusting toilet paper that he dug up over the years. So just please don't do that. That's my number one. Also, fire safety is number one, and toilet paper is probably number two. They're both up there.
Got it. All right. So 30 years since your original hike, we have a new edition coming out of Almost Somewhere. Where can our readers find that? Where can our listeners and your future readers find that?
Yeah, I hope everybody are readers. Yeah, so you can order it from your favorite independent bookstore or from the University of Nebraska Press. And I have a friends and family discount code that I can give you that you can post.
Is it better than the friends and family discount for your coaching?
It's about the same percentage off. It's 40% off, which is actually my author discount. So it's pretty good. And then, of course, you can get it at the Evil Empire that starts with an A. But it's better to support local independent bookstores. So, yeah, and the new edition has the new Afterword book club discussion questions and 29 photos from the original trip.
Nice. I'd love to see those. Love to see those.
Yeah, they're funny because Erica had a huge external frame backpack. She looks like she's carrying a refrigerator down the trail.
All right. Hey, Suzanne, what is your next big adventure? What are you planning?
It's so interesting that you asked that because I did a podcast interview right as I was finishing the Camino Frances. And I was like, I've just had this big adventure. I don't know where I'm going to go. I don't know if I'm going to go anywhere soon. And a week later, I ended up hiking the Camino Portugues. And then I listened to the podcast and I was like, I just said I wasn't going anywhere. And now here I'm hiking again. So I'm going to say I don't have anything planned except for I'm going to Burning Man next week. And I'm going away to write for a month in November. But I always have my eye on long distance hikes. And my husband and I have been talking about for years we've done a lot of the parts of the PCT, but never done it as a through hike. So we've been talking about that. I don't know. We'll see. It feels like home to me. I can reach it from my house. In about 3 or 4 hours, I can get to the TRT, which hooks into the PCT. So I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm in a place where I want to settle down and write, and I'm working on a craft book and a novel. Okay.
Now, do you want to publish a date on this PCT through hike?
Publish a date?
Yeah, put it out there in the universe right now. You're going to do this in 2024 or 2025. And once you get it out in the universe, then there's pressure to do it.
Okay. I think my craft book is due in January of 2025, and I have a lot of work to do on that. So, and my novel, I need to finish a draft of that. So I'm going to say 2025.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, that would be a good year for me. That would be the year that I turn 55.
Like the Van Halen song, I Can't Drive 55 on the PCT.
So I think that would be a good year for me. And then maybe I'll have a big birthday party at the end because I got robbed of my 50th because it was during COVID.
Okay. And I have to ask a special request.
Yes.
That when you get to the Agua Dulce portion of the PCT, that you send me a message and I could come and take you and your husband out to the great Mexican restaurant that's out there. Do some trail magic.
I would absolutely love that. Yes.
Okay.
I'll hold you to that.
It is a deal. All right, Dr. Sassy, do you know where we are?
We're at the lightning round, or what did you call it? The advice column.
Lightning round advice column. Yes.
Hiking hacks.
Hiking hacks. That's right. Here's where you get to give some trail wisdom to our audience to make their next outdoor experience even better. So what do you have for us, Dr. Sassy?
Oh, so it's just like free form advice.
Free form advice. You like to give advice, right?
I do, but can you give me some, like, a little bit of guidelines or just any advice?
Yeah, some tip or trick you've picked up on from your time on the trail to make their next adventure even better.
Okay. I'm going to start, because we're transitioning from toilet paper. I am going to start by, if you are a woman, you need a pee rag. And you don't need a fancy one. Like, you don't need to spend whatever on whatever the brands are. I just use a bandana. And I love that. So I use way less toilet paper. And I didn't start doing that until like probably 10 years ago. So the pee rag is really good. I also think
you put the bandana, do you keep it on your head? And then
I tie it to my backpack.
Got it. Yeah, you don't want to mix those two up.
Also, I used to have a really big problem with blisters. And ever since I'm sorry, I'm going to sound like an advertisement. I swear no one's giving me any money. But I use hiker goo, which is like this cream stuff that you put on your feet. And then I use smart wool socks, and I like never have blisters anymore. So I would also go to your doctor and beg them for a prescription of diclofenac. It's like a big time anti-inflammatory. And for me, as someone who's had like joint issues, if I get into a situation where I'm in tons of pain, I can take that for a couple of days and it will help with anything, from Baker cysts to like bad knees and bad hips and shin splints. And for me, that drug, it's like a big anti-inflammatory drug. It saved me. And so I think about, we were talking about my book, and really it's about hiking a long time ago and I didn't know what I was doing. And so much of that book is about what not to do on the John Muir Trail. And the biggest thing is really make sure you're with the people you want to walk with and you want to camp with, and that will also be people who you trust their decision making and who won't leave you. Like, and if there's a really dangerous river crossing, you all make a decision to do it together, or who won't leave you so that they cross early in the morning and then you're stuck in the afternoon when the water's higher. So I would say too, also always make sure if you're not alone, where you're making just decisions for yourself, that sometimes in a group it can be even more dangerous, because you go along with what other people want to do. You get that group mentality, and it's not always the best thing. So that's my advice.
A lot of hiking hacks right there. We got 3 or 4 of them at least. And I think that says something in terms of going out there and doing everything you shouldn't do, and yet still looking back on it with such fond memories and wanting to recreate that and get out there again and just keep going back out into nature. There is something about doing it wrong and still having the time of your life.
Yeah, definitely. You can get away with doing certain things wrong, but in a big snow year and with big rivers, you can't get away with doing everything wrong.
Gotta be careful. That's right. All right. So there you have it. We are just about done here. Hope our listeners enjoyed our time with Suzanne. I want to thank her for joining us this week. Sassy, how can our listeners keep up with you on social media, and where can they get updates on your latest adventures?
My website is suzanneroberts.net. And I post about a lot of my travels on Instagram and Suzanne Roberts 28. And I also send out, for anyone who's interested in writing, I send out a weekly writing prompt, and they're always themed. And so I've done themes like the call to adventure and travel writing and nature and outdoors. And this month's theme was the world of work. And so it's called 52 Writing Prompts, and it's a Substack newsletter, and you can get a free writing prompt every month. You can cancel anytime. If you want all the writing prompts, you have to pay $5 a month. But anybody who's interested in writing about your own adventures, I highly recommend writing exercises and writing prompts. And you can check mine out and see if they work for you. They only take 20 minutes. Everyone has 20 minutes.
$5 a prompt for some homework. Sounds like a plan.
No, it's $5 for 4 or 5 prompts.
Oh, okay.
$5 a month.
Per month. That's right.
It's a really good deal. Yeah.
Got it. All right. Hey, remember to check out Hiker Trash Radio on social media as well. We're on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And if you have comments or clips you want to share, you can send it to me at hikertrashradio@gmail.com.
The beaten path.
Now, Sassy, unfortunately, we can't always be on the trail. And when we're not, we need to find a way to get our adventure fix. So I'm going to ask you to share some outdoor adventure media with our listeners to help them get by. This could be a book, a movie, documentary. We call this segment Off the Beaten Path. Any recommendations?
Yeah, I really love it. It's not so much a hiking book, but it's a book that just came out, a memoir that just came out about nature and about a Black mother's experience of nature. It's called Soil, A Black Mother's Garden by Camille Dungy. And it's a beautiful book. And I think it's really helps people see different perspectives of nature. And I highly recommend that book.
Soil, we'll have to check that one out. Thank you.
Just came out. Yeah.
Okay.
What have we not asked you?
That's my youngest daughter, by the way. I don't know what accent that is. She was born and raised in Southern California. It just keeps getting wackier and wackier as the episode goes on. But just one more segment for you called, What Have I Not Asked You That You're Dying to Tell Us About? What do we miss tonight?
I was expecting you to ask me if I was going to write another book about thru hiking. And I've been thinking about it. And I'm just not sure, but that's what I thought you were going to ask.
Okay. And if you were, what aspect would it be about?
As I mentioned, I'm writing a novel, and I've written 2 other books since Almost Somewhere came out. One's about international travel called Bad Tourist, and the other one is called Animal Bodies. And those are both memoirs and essays. And I've thought about possibly writing a memoir about hiking the Camino. And when I was hiking the Camino, I kept saying, oh, the Camino's jumped the shark. There's so many people hiking the Camino. There's so much media about the Camino. I listened to Andrew McCarthy's new book, Walking with Sam, while I was walking the Camino. There's a new movie. But as I walked, I hoped I wouldn't have a book idea because I didn't want to get interrupted from writing this novel I'm writing. But I have an idea for a Camino book. And so I don't know if it's going to happen, but we'll see.
Nice. Have you read Keith Foskett? He has a book on the Camino, English writer. Very funny.
I've heard about it, but I have not read it.
Check that one out. And then also when you're done with the PCT, or maybe before you do the PCT, have you read Journeys North by Barney Scout Mann?
I have not, but I'll put it on my
another
list.
good one. Another good one, written by a male, but he really tells the story of several people on trail that he interacted with along the way, including, I think, a great female perspective. So it's a really well done book.
I'll check it out. Thank you.
You are very welcome. All right. We are finished. Thank you for coming on the podcast, Suzanne. We wish you the very best in your future adventures. Hope you'll come back and tell us some more stories.
All right. Thank you for having me, and I enjoyed it.
Good. I'm glad. As we wrap up today, do you have any shout outs to friends and family?
Do I have any what?
Shout outs?
Shout outs.
Shout outs. No, not that husband of yours?
He's working on our Down by the River van.
Okay.
Yeah, he's busy.
Maybe a hello to Erica and Dion.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Hello to Erica and Dion. And I have so much respect for them for allowing me not only to use their real names, but now to use their photographs. Because the first edition that came out, the photo on the cover was the 3 of us, a self-timer from the back. But now I'm using photos where you can tell who they are. So who they were 30 years ago.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely. That's a good point.
All right. Now I hesitate to ask. No, I don't. I'm going in and asking, what's my name? Do you have a name for me? And will you share it with me?
Maybe. I don't know if I should share it. Is that okay? I have one, but I'm not going to share it right now. But I might share it later.
Okay. You're going to keep me on the edge of my seat. I'll have to wait for that one then.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, thank you for tuning in. Always remember, the trail is the trail. It doesn't care if you want to go downhill. It doesn't care if it's almost dark and you're looking for a campsite. It doesn't even care if you're packing out your teepee and glamping your way through the ultra pub crawl in Europe. The trail is the trail. Embrace the suck.